everyone, welcome to another episode of Table Talk. I'm your host, Jake Combs, and I do apologize because the camera keeps falling every time I step away from it. So, like I was saying, I'm Jake Combs. Welcome to another episode of Table Talk. And tonight, we are going to be opening Warhammer Underworlds Nethermaze, the Rivals of Harrowdeep, and then the last Harrowdeep warband, the Exiled Dead. Now, we're going to go ahead and actually start off with Rivals of Harrowdeep. Now, at the time of this video's releasing, these items will be available for pre-order, and at the time of the filming, however, these are basically just announced, and these were provided by Games Workshop for the purpose of our video today. And so we're going to go ahead and open these up and dive in. Now, with Rivals of Harrowdeep, because the models are actually the warbands that came in the Harrowdeep box set starter, we're not going to actually spend too much time looking at the models because they're exactly the same. But we're going to go ahead and take a look at the contents overall, see if there's anything outside of what we saw before, and then we're going to look at the new. And then, as always, I'm going to use my knife to open, and just make sure that if you are using a knife as well, you always are cutting away from yourself. Safety first and all that. And then if you are not old enough to be handling a knife, make sure that you have an adult do it for you, or at least adult supervision. And we're actually going to go ahead and just take the plastic off of the other, just so that way I'm not reaching into the trash can as often. There we go. And then Harrowdeep is just sealed. It's not actually have a plastic outside. So, Rivals of Harrowdeep, like I said, these are the same warbands that we had in the actual Harrowdeep box set itself. So we have our assembly guide, very similar, if not nearly identical to the original, except for this one, it says Rivals of Harrowdeep and it says Nethermaze at the top. Now, as far as the story goes, Harrowdeep, was the last one that we had. It's basically kind of like a big cave system underneath the water, and so Nethermaze is actually located below Harrowdeep, rather. So it's a kind of a deeper, almost like the next level of the dungeon, if you want to look at it that way. Now, one thing that they've done differently with this is, we have this tray, and they've actually designed it so it actually fits securely in between the gaps between the sprues. So literally, I'm holding this upside down. I'm not holding anything in place. Literally, I've got two fingers on the outside, and that's it. Nothing's falling out. So, you're not going to have to worry about, pieces kind of shaking around in there because of that. But, looking at the models, same thing that I said before, a ton of detail on these guys. And if you haven't already, I highly recommend watching the battle report on Warhammer Plus that specifically was for Harrowdeep. That actually featured both these teams, because honestly, when I was looking at the box set, I liked the look of the Cruel Boys models, but nothing really spoke to me about them themselves as far as which one I was most excited to play with. And the Lumineth Realm Lords honestly was the more interesting looking faction, but watching them play had me wanting to actually play Cruel Boys even more than I did before. And so it's definitely worth giving it a watch, just especially seeing the different play styles and how they work. But again, the models are exactly the same. We have just a lot of detail, but again, my favorite part of Underworlds in general is just the attention to detail on the bases, especially. A lot of people have a hard enough time actually building their bases and making them all unique and match the army. And with this, it comes right out of the box with its own kind of thematic bases, and all you really have to do is just add color to it. And then we also have the Lumineth Realm Lords box, or sprue rather. And then we have our pack of cards. Nothing else in the tray but other than that. So we're going to go ahead and open this up. Let's see. There we go. Trying to find a spot where I wouldn't accidentally slice a card. Because if anyone's going to slice the card, it's probably going to be myself. All right. Now, from what I've read about it, it sounded like that these cards are just the exact same cards that you had in Harrowdeep for these two factions. And I'm just taking a quick look, see if anything really stands out as far as anything unique. And at a glance, nothing really stands out as far as anything that we haven't seen before from the previous release. So until I can bring them up side by side, I'm going to assume that that's the case there. And then let's take a so that glance through I just did was for the Lumineth Realm Lords. So now we're looking at the Cruel Boys. See if anything stands out there. Now, one thing I will say is that I've always really enjoyed the different artwork on the cards. Right here on Titan of Cruelty, we have what looks like a savage orc, or just one of the Cruel Boys themselves with some neon skull paint on his face. And you can actually use these cards as a kind of a basis for how you paint the models. But as far as the uniqueness of the cards within, I'm not seeing anything that jumps out at me as a new card. So basically, if you are having trouble getting a hold of Harrowdeep itself and want to be able to have these warbands without getting a whole big box set, this is definitely going to be a cheaper way to get a hold of them. The only thing that you're really missing out there is you're not going to be able to get the actual boards themselves, but otherwise you got pretty much everything that you would have had in Harrowdeep. I can't think of anything that would have missed. It's not like with the release that went to bookstores instead that had traps and kind of gave you a whole new way to play. So since we don't have anything like that, if you don't already have Harrowdeep, it may just be better to go with Rivals of Harrowdeep and get it with Nethermaze. But if you're looking for kind of the whole kind of overarching more or less story, then doing both is definitely going to be a good way to go. That way you have you have Harrowdeep itself, and then you actually have the journey into Nethermaze, and you can use the same warbands doing that. Now, so looking at the Exiled Dead, we have 2 sprues, a total of looks like 7 minis, and basically, other than the Necromancer, they're kind of a cross between zombies that have been risen and kind of closer to skeletons, And actually it looks like they're all zombies to a degree, and then kind of changed by mad science. And the fact that we have a necromancer who's also a mad scientist is a really cool concept. It's not something that we really see. I mean, looking at the tech that's being used, like, one of them has this kind of overly large arm that has a bunch of like electric nodes sticking out of it that we saw in the first preview during Adepticon. And that kind of tech style is very reminiscent of the Skaven. And so like when we first saw that, I thought maybe it was like the Skaven using their technology to like either reanimate or control people, before I actually saw the pictures of the necromancer himself. And so I thought maybe it could have been like more of like a hybrid army. But with this being just strictly from death, not gonna have anything really crazy there, no hybrid. But if there was ever going to be one, Underworlds is the place to do that, just because you only need a few models and then you're basically done with the concept. And so I mean, that could be a really interesting way to go. I mean, now if they were to do exactly like I described, it's going to look kind of played out, just because the Exiled Dead already is using some of the similar kind of style. So that exact scenario wouldn't really work, but doing like a hybrid warband between like two different factions is still very doable within Underworlds. I mean, what I would love to see is an Underworlds warband that kind of consists of almost like a D&D style party, where you have like one from each group of from order, so you could have a fire slayer with a bright wizard and a Stormcast Eternal in one warband together. And so doing something like that could be really cool. Now, no clue if they're ever going to come out with anything like that. Other than what they've shown on Warhammer Community, I have not seen or heard anything like that. But I think that it would be a really cool idea if they did. Now, back to the topic at hand. The bases I really like. I mean, honestly, they are very reminiscent of the style that I did for my Curse City bases, with a lot of big tiles. And so, I mean, I could easily paint them to look like that. Then thematically they would fit with all of my undead for Curse City. And so if I was going to be using these on the tabletop along with those models and my Soulblight Gravelords, having them all have that same overall theme, I think definitely will tie it all together. And so, like, right off the bat, got really lucky with how these are set up. But as far as the models go, with them being undead, besides like all the tech stuff coming out of it, we got a lot of detail there. Zombies, naturally are going to have a lot of detail, just because you have rotting parts and you have torn up clothes and things like that. And so there's definitely a good deal of detail on these guys. So we'll set that over here. And then now what I found interesting is that we have this kind of partial base, and looking at it, I'm not really sure which base that goes on. I mean, look at this one. I mean, we kind of have a little bit of a deeper recess, but it's just not very clear looking at it. So let's go ahead and open this up. Okay, so I see how it goes. On one of the sprues, or one of the models, basically kind of like almost like going up steps, and so doing that kind of half sprue elevates one of the feet, so that way it lines up properly for crawling over those steps. And I do like that they give you a painted example of each of the models. It's just not full body. I think that would have been better if they did like a full body shot of each of the models for that example, especially since the back of the box doesn't have that either. Now, I'm going to go ahead and look at the cards. Now, it does come with additional cards that are extra universal and Grand Alliance objective cards and power cards that you can use to construct decks for your warbands. Now, personally, when I play, I always like to use just the pre-configured decks. Every time I've played a game that has any sort of deck building, I've always been really bad at it. Like, whenever I go through and I find, okay, these are the abilities or these are the objectives that I want to use, and then almost every time I have a bad enough shuffle that I get some of the cards way too early and the cards that I need are coming way too late, and kind of almost shooting myself in the foot there. And it doesn't really take away from my gameplay experience, but with this game, if you have a bad deck or a bad shuffle, if your deck's not well balanced, I mean, you could easily lose everything just because of that. It's just like with the dice rolls. If the dice are not in your favor that day, you're gonna have a really hard time. So we're just gonna look at a couple of these cards. So one of them is a Gambit spell, Iara Summons. If cast, choose one fighter within 3 hexes of the caster. Push the fighter 1 hex towards the caster. Like a spell or an ability like that, I always kind of think of it as the get over here ability. Like in Mortal Kombat with Scorpion, you hit that guy with the spear and pull him towards you, then you're gonna be able to do some other things. So I mean, if you time this just right, if you have all of your guys set up on either side of where this guy's getting pulled to, pull them in, and now you can activate and attack with all of your other units, especially if you time it to where that model is already activated and already used their turn, and then pull them in close. They're gonna have a lot harder time retaliating and fighting back before you might actually be able to take them out. So that's definitely a good card if you can set yourself up right for it. Now this one, I like the picture. It shows one of the Exiled Dead along with the pirate ogre. I can't remember what his name was from the last release that they did. And this card is called Leech Strength. And choose 1 friendly fighter and 1 enemy fighter adjacent. In the next activation, the chosen friendly fighter's range 1 attack actions have a damage characteristic equal to the highest damage characteristic of the chosen enemy's fighter's attack actions. So basically a way to boost your attack, especially if you're using an inferior stats on the model that you're using versus the one that you're hitting. And then here's an upgrade called Illusory Strength. Do not spend any glory points when you play this card at the end of the action phase or when this fighter is chosen by a gambit or is dealt damage. Break this card. This fighter's range 1 attack actions have Grievous, and it's that's just the quote that it has on there. So definitely some cool stuff in here. Definitely some stuff that I can see being used quite easily. And then we have into the objective cards. let's see. So one featuring the Exiled Dead is Ever Downwards. At least Exiled Dead on the picture. And it's a surge hybrid. Score this immediately after a power step in which you delved 3 or more times, or you delved 1 or more times and one of the feature tokens you delved was in a hex in an enemy territory and occupied by your leader. So definitely some cool cards there. Alright, then the Exiled Dead. So we have Bolt Unbound, which is a conductive minion. Coil Unbound, which is also a conductive minion. That's the one with the stuff in his arm. Dantalos the Exile, which is our necromancer. Ion Unbound, a conductive minion. Prentice Markov. Regulus Unbound, which is a minion. And then Vlash Unbound, which is a conductive minion. Now, I don't remember what conductive means as far as the game is concerned, but the fact that you're using electricity and stuff through them basically tells me that like you can probably pass that electricity from one to another, and maybe either get some boosts for the ones that are conductive, and cause some damage for the ones that are not. So one of the cards is a Gambit ploy called Reassert Control. Choose one uninspired friendly minion, heal 2 that fighter, remove that fighter's raise counters, that fighter is inspired. So basically kind of a twofold, inspire the fighter and heal them for 2 wounds in the same action. Definitely a great card to have in your deck. But that's specific to the Exiled Dead. Here's an upgrade. Converts Zeal. +1 wounds, +1 dice to this fighter's range. 1 attack actions. And then for one of the objectives, we have Dread Puppetry. Again, these cards are just completely grabbed at random. Dread Puppetry is a surge. Score this immediately after a friendly Regulus is given a raise counter. So definitely some easy objective points there. But as far as the warband goes, I'm always a big fan of more undead. Just like I am with Chaos. For a thematic army or unit, these definitely are a great looking set. And the fact that the bases very similar match to my custom bases that I did for Cursed City means that thematically they're going to match very well and allow me to field them on the board together. Now, Nethermaze, like I said, this is underneath Harrowdeep as far as its location goes. We have our rulebook and assembly guide. Go take a quick look at those. So our assembly guide is literally 2 sides. One side is the Skaven, the other side is our elves. Can't remember what this group is called. And then our rule book, it's crazy thick, but I do love the detail that they have in here, the full color images. And they mark out certain things to show you exactly what they're referring to, highlighting the squares, so that way you have a better understanding of what they're saying. And then, let's see, one thing I'm curious about. Okay, cool. So we do have some actual lore in here going into the start of the game. Focusing on the Shadeborn and Skittershank's Claw Pack. So definitely worth reading those. Then we have our boards. We have our dice. We have our sprues, and then we have all our cards. So looking at the sprues, so we have the Skaven. Now I love the bases that we've seen so far for them. Now, the Skaven that I've already been working on getting started with, these bases don't match them whatsoever. But they are really cool models. I've been looking for the right gutter runner to use. But that was more because I was actually, I'm in the process of collecting pieces to build a Vermintide themed diorama. And so far, the gutter runners that you have part of this team are going to be fantastic for that. Just kind of mix and match a few of the body parts to get the exact pose that I want. But I'm hoping that we see a Rivals of Harrowdeep type release for the Nethermaze models, because if we do, then that means I'll end up being able to get extra without having to buy a whole new Nethermaze set. Because again, I do like to have all of the warbands as well. There is a ton of detail on those models. I've always been a big fan of Skaven. They are basically just another form of chaos, and so definitely some really cool stuff. Now the Shadeborn, I loved the Shadeborn models that we had with Catacombs for Warcry, and the fact that we're doing more for Nethermaze has me really excited, because I have a feeling that down the road we're going to have more Shadeborn type models to tie into maybe like Daughters of Cain, or maybe tie into as part of their own faction or something like that. So definitely looking forward to see what comes there from that. And then these models, they're not as detailed, just because they use a lot of cloaks and stuff like that, but the bases themselves just have so much detail, so much personality. Now my only complaint here is with them both coming in the same box. I would kind of hope that their bases are going to kind of match each other, because they're fighting in the same area. But I also understand that you're not going to be using these guys only against those guys ever. You're going to play against other warbands from some of the other releases as well. So having them not match, it makes sense. I just think that it would have been really cool to tie them together more. All right. So we have our two boards, just like usual. And as usual, they are double-sided. Now, like this one, it kind of looks like the head of a shark that's laying upside down. Looks like you can knock one of your opponents into it, possibly be eaten, or at the very least wounded. And then we have our objective markers as well as our various tokens. And so we'll leave those to make them easy to see, because the objective markers always have a bit of personality. Now I would prefer to have a actual terrain piece to represent those, just because of the overall look and style of them. Having them be flat on the board, I understand it works better that way for gameplay reasons, but with the look, the board's gonna have so much more personality if you could do a 3D copy of them. So here, the two sprues for the Exiled Dead. And then basically the two sprues are connected, so it's just one sprue for the Skaven. And then, like I was saying with the bases, just a lot of detail there. And I really like to look at this one right here. It almost looks like a mad science layer lab of some sort. Not just the sewers like everybody else's bases look. And then we have the Shadeborn. You know, again, most of their detail is on their bases because their robes and stuff cover up a lot of their detail, but you know, still they are pretty well detailed and definitely like the look of them. And then here are our objective tokens. Especially with you know, the models needing to be able to stand on those objective markers. You know, it makes sense why they don't do that. It's just, again, they have so much personality. I think it would be best to maybe create something like that, maybe where they hold the objectives if they stand next to it, some variation. Now we have a universal card deck that you can borrow from, as well as the actual Shadeborn deck and the Skittershanks Claw Pack deck. And then we have our objective cards and looks like all of our character cards as well. So we're just going to pick a couple cards at random. So this one's a Gambit Ploy. Specifically looks like it's for the Oziarch Bone Reapers. Step between shadows. Choose one friendly fighter in a cover hex that has no move or charge tokens. Place the chosen fighter in a different cover hex and give them one move token. So basically kind of almost like a teleport ability. An upgrade called Abyssal Summoner. During attack actions made by this fighter, if this fighter is in a cover hex, this fighter is considered to have one additional supporting fighter. So that's actually a pretty helpful one. You know, be able to, you know, support without actually having the support there. And then Chum the Water's objective. Dual score this in an end phase if one or more enemy fighters are each on a feature token, and one or more of these fighters have one or more wound counters. So another, you know, pretty easy sounding objective card. So definitely some cool stuff there. Alright, so this card deck is actually specific to Grand Alliance. Gives you additional cards to use for each one. Let's see, so this one for Order, Banishing Light, it's a reaction upgrade. After this fighter's activation, you can flip one or more feature tokens that are not objective tokens and that are within one hex of this fighter. So basically a way to reveal those objectives earlier. For Death Grand Alliance, we have Bonds of Death upgrade. Give this only to a fighter with a wounds characteristic of 2. Reaction after an attack action that takes this fighter out of action. Place this fighter in a starting hex in your territory. Give this fighter 1 raise token, then break this card. So kind of a like a revive if you die ability. An objective, Arcane Schemes for Chaos. It's a hybrid. Score this in an end phase if there are 3 or more Gambit spells in your power discard pile, or 1 or more friendly Tzeentch wizards each hold an objective. Alright, so we're looking at the Shadeborn deck now. Got some really cool looking models there. I really like the look of the cards for the characters themselves as well, just as far as the pictures are concerned, I mean. And then, so one of the Gambit is Suffocating Shadows, -1 defense to enemy fighters in the next activation step to a minimum of 1, -2 defense instead to a minimum of 1 to enemy fighters in cover hexes in the next activation step. So basically a way to make your enemies a little bit easier to hurt. Man, the yawns just won't stop coming. An upgrade called Shadewalker. This fight has the flying trait, +1 move. And then one of the objectives, prolonging the inevitable. Score this in an end phase if 1 or more friendly fighters are adjacent to 1 or more vulnerable enemy fighters. So basically with that warband, you definitely have to be, on the move and keep attacking to maximize the efficiency of some of those cards. All right. Now, out of the cards for Skittershanks, Claw Pack, the one for Creep Kin Whisperer is definitely my favorite of the pictures. And then we have a Gambit Ploy Redirected Attack. It's a reaction. Play this card during an attack action that targets a friendly assassin. After the determined success step, if the attack action succeeds, choose 1 friendly minion that is within 2 hexes of that assassin. That minion is taken out of action. Then the combat sequence ends. So basically, sacrifice somebody weaker to save somebody stronger, and give them a little bit more time to get down to it and start and do their killing. One of the upgrades is Prehensile Tail. You can reroll up to 2 attack dice in the attack rolls for this fighter's attack actions if this fighter has 1 or more attack action upgrades. And this one, Daggers in the Dark, is an objective. Score this immediately after a staggered enemy fighter is taken out of action. And I love the picture, just basically kind of carved out with the Eshin symbols made into almost like throwing stars. So definitely some cool looking cards there. A lot of cool thematic pieces. Definitely looking forward to building the Skaven more than anything. The Shadeborn are really cool though. I do love their overall style. I think that they've become what I always wanted Dark Elves to become, something much cooler than they've been. And I mean, Dark Elves themselves, haven't really seen anything new in quite a while. So, I'm hoping that with this edition, we might see something more from them. Obviously, you do have the Daughters of Cain, which are still Dark Elves. But, the bulk of the original Dark Elf armies has become, part of Cities of Sigmar. I want to see them get back to, the Dark Elves on Cold One Riders, things like that. and maybe might even luck out and see Malice Darkblade again. Definitely hope so, because as much as I love that character, I was never a fan of his model, and so I'm hoping that they do come up with something new for him eventually, or at the very least bring him back in the lore with Black Library, so so that way we can continue his story, because it kind of felt like his story kind of just left off almost done, because it seemed like he was gearing up to actually get into a fight with Malekith directly, and for him to kind of fizzle out and go nowhere was a bit disappointing. But again, that's something that I'm hoping we see this year, or sometime soon. But again, I probably wouldn't count on it either. But other than that, thank you guys all for watching, and I do appreciate you guys sticking with me to the end, and I do hope you all have a great night. Thank you.